Hey everybody, this is Jim with Ease Seating Systems. I'm here today with Kelly Machowicz to talk a little bit about recreational therapy. And as an occupational therapist, I have to laugh a little bit because I always felt like my profession was always misunderstood. And I kind of feel like that might be the same way with your profession. And I actually just talked a little bit right before we met with some therapy friends, kind of told them what I was talking about, and they're kind of along the same line of me. It's like, okay, recreational, obviously, something like that in the name, but I have a feeling there's a little bit more
Oh
to
yeah.
it. So, just to get started, I was wondering, how did you get involved with it, and were there any certain moments or experiences that you face where it just kind of dawned on you like, hey, this is what I want to do?
Yeah. So I probably can speak for most rec therapists is that a lot of us, I think, have just fallen into this career path or started with a different idea in mind and then, stumbled across recreation therapy. So I originally was thinking about physical therapy and then realized how much school you had to have. And fresh out of high school, I'm like, oh, you don't want to go to school for that many more years.
Yeah.
And all of that. So I knew I wanted to do something where I was helping other people. I wanted to do something in the medical field. And my roommate at the time happened to be majoring in recreation therapy.
Okay.
And so I had no idea what it was, to be honest. But she was like, yeah, just go talk to the professors and they'll tell you more about it. And so I did. And I was like, that sounds like such a cool job. I didn't know that existed. Sign me up. So that is how I got signed up in recreational therapy at Central Michigan University.
Oh, nice. Okay. So,
Yeah.
tell me maybe a little bit more about the company you work for. Was it Home and Community Recreation Therapy?
Yeah. So it's called Home and Community Recreation Therapy. We refer to it as HCRT for short. And I've been there since I've graduated. So we do home and community based rec therapy, as the title says. And so we work with individuals that have been in automobile accidents. So whether they've been like vehicle versus vehicle or pedestrian, but somehow involving an auto vehicle accident, and has sustained like brain injuries or spinal cord injuries. And so we see these individuals, depending on what their needs are, either in the home or we pick them up and take them in the community.
Okay. How big is the company?
Oh gosh, we're all around Southeast Michigan. We have, honestly, I don't even know how many therapists now,
Hmm.
maybe 30 or so. I'm not sure, but because we all live in different areas, we all kind of cover a different
Okay.
part of the state. So I think we go as far north as potentially like a little Lansing, maybe a little bit further than Lansing, and then all Metro Detroit area. I think far as I think we might even have some people in Grand Rapids, to be honest. But
Okay.
yeah, so a little bit of everywhere.
Gotcha. It's a
Hmm.
pretty big area.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
Luckily, we kind of can pick and choose which clients we take on, so it is
okay.
nice just because you can choose to stay a little bit closer to home, or if you want to open up your range, you can
Gotcha.
take on some
You
more
got a
clients.
little bit of flexibility then.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, a little bit more about the profession. Can you tell me about some of the typical responsibilities of a
Yeah.
recreational therapist?
So our job is typically after someone, has this significant injury from an accident, they spend sometimes months in an inpatient setting in the hospital. And then eventually they get discharged and go to outpatient. Um, and then eventually, a lot of times you're discharged even from that and just required to go back to your normal life and figure that out. And so that's a lot of times where we step in is once these people are either back home or maybe they are in a program or a group home or something like that. We come in and we do an evaluation on them and really explore what their interests were before their accident.
Mm-hmm.
Um, whatever recreational leisure hobby interests that they had, we take that into account. And then sometimes these people want to get back to those activities, and then other times they have no interest just because they compare themselves to their old selves, and they don't think they could do that particular activity again. So then that's our job to kind of introduce new activities and show them what they can do. And so that's it's really such a wide range. It's really based off of what their interests are and what they want to do. So
Gotcha.
we write treatment goals based off of whatever deficit that they sustained in their accident. So a lot of times with like brain injury, there's a lot of memory issues or problem solving. A lot of times it can be social skills that are impacted. It can be emotional, so a lot of depression and anxiety after that. So we kind of take all of those things into account and then write our goals based around that, and plug in activities and outings around their interests.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that people sometimes are kind of in this state of mind where they're focused more on what they can't do or what they previously used to do. So how often is that the case?
Oh, majority, I would say. I mean, you'll get some that are very, very excited to get back to it, but a lot of times, especially with, I found with brain injury too, it's like, they feel like they're a completely different person than they were before. And so I think a lot of times they're just trying to figure out who that new person is after their accident.
Okay.
And so, they're constantly comparing, saying, oh, I used to be really good at this and I probably can't be good at this anymore because maybe, they have some type of physical deficit, or they're weaker, or, their memory, they can't remember like they used to. And so a lot of times you'll come across that. And I think that's a big piece of where we step into, is just trying to be that positive, like, light, and just encouraging people to really, get out of their comfort zone and know that there is a lot that they still can do.
So I'm guessing there's certain domains that you cover. Obviously there's like the physical, getting them involved, and maybe social in the group settings. What other areas are you working with?
So it's funny because we are like Jack and Jills of all trades. So we do kind of cover like a wide range where, physical therapy, you'd say more of like the physical, and occupationals, like, the self-care and the ADLs and all of that. And we kind of cover a little bit of everything. So it's, we do have physical goals, which could be they're more broad, I would say, than a physical therapist would be. So it'd be more of like, okay, we're just going to increase work on increasing just general endurance in the community, or strength. So we do have a couple clients that we see that have fitness goals. So maybe they were into fitness or working out, or lived a very active lifestyle beforehand. And so, that's where we would address some of those physical goals. And then, like you said, social tends to be probably one of the biggest pieces I see, especially with brain injury too, is a lot of times the part that's affected, they can lose those pragmatic skills and just like how to initiate and maintain just like a normal conversation. And so that's another thing that we'll address either while you're out in the community. So how are you interacting with other people, the cashiers, or, all of those types of things. So those interactions that you see just on a day-to-day basis, as well as trying to get support, I think, with like other peers in that have gone through similar situations. So we do like small group gatherings every now and then to provide that piece. And then like I said, the emotional side of it before. So there's a lot of anxiety and depression that can come along with that, whether it just be like general anxiety of just, leaving the house. So a lot of times you'll see these people will isolate themselves afterwards, and they just don't want to get out and do anything anymore. And so we definitely address that side of it too. And then I think the other piece would be, so we got the physical, social, emotional, cognitive is like one of the biggest pieces. So like I mentioned, like problem solving skills, attention, and impulse control, different things like that, specifically, depending on what part of your brain was damaged. That
Gotcha.
could be a big piece of it. And then we also kind of have another category, which I guess we consider probably like community participation. So that would be more like, are they satisfied with their life? Do they feel like they're living like a quality life?
Mm-hmm.
Do they have awareness of like the resources in their community? So that would be kind of like that fifth probably domain that I would say is just like a general community participation kind of area that we address a lot.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, so you said you work a little bit on impulse control. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more on it? Like, what are the behaviors you would normally
Yeah.
see?
So, gosh, it can be kind of all across the board. So a lot of times you'll see it with money management a lot of times. So
Mm-hmm.
not really having, awareness of a budget and how to budget and like, simple things like just looking at the cost of an item before you purchase it. And, I'll have a lot of people that just throw things in their cart or just like, yeah, slide their credit card for this or that. And so that's a big piece of when we're in the community is trying to be aware of what we're spending and where we're spending it and budgeting for those recreational and like leisure interest activities.
Gotcha.
A lot of it could be behavioral though too, where a lot of times they may say what instantly comes to their mind and they don't have that filter, I think is a big
Okay.
part of specifically with brain injury. You'll see that a lot too. So, I mean, every now and then it can be more of like sexual comments are kind of common with certain brain injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But I think just saying what comes to someone's mind and not picking up on those, like some of those nonverbal cues that like, you and I would kind of notice when you're having an interaction, like, oh, this person's not interested or,
Yeah.
or reading the room kind of thing. So I think a lot of that is just having us there as rec therapists to
Mm-hmm.
to model, I think, a lot of these skills and then also cue and guide conversations when things might not be going, appropriately.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we kind of just talked about a little bit more, but if you could just maybe even elaborate just a little bit more on like what aspects make your profession therapeutic, and really what's the difference between therapeutic recreation and just taking on a leisure activity in and of itself.
Yeah, so that's like always a big thing too, because everyone always says, "Well, you guys are just taking them out," but
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of times people don't realize everything that goes into just being able to like go out and get in the community and do like a specific, maybe it's a concert or a sporting event or an art fair or something like that. There's so much more that goes into that, especially when you have a brain injury. It's the planning piece of it. It's like the resource part of it. So how do I even know what's going on in my community? And so a lot of times that's a pretty major role of being a recreation therapist, specifically in like the home and community realm. But that is us researching and doing the research with our clients and outside of that to be able to educate them of what their community offers. So I think that is one of the biggest differences is that we spend more time researching and helping educate people rather than just like taking them out for a day and then having them go home and then be like, well, how could I do this eventually on my own if I wanted to? So we're there to kind of teach them how to find these resources.
Mm-hmm.
And then the whole planning process of it too, right? So like, how do I locate where this event's taking place at and the planning piece of it, the
Mm-hmm.
budgeting piece, how much will I need? Like how much does a ticket cost if it requires a ticket? There's just so much more that goes into something
Gotcha.
once you have that injury, I think. And then like the memory too, a lot of times is like once
Mm-hmm.
you're there is I'll see it a lot with a couple of my clients is just like being able to figure out where you parked the car at after you come out of the store. So there's more to it than us just taking these people out, where a lot of times, like, a family member or aide or whoever it might be that takes people out, they can tend to, I think, just kind of do the task or do everything for that individual, where we're more there to prompt and kind of support and guide and like really make these people think, how to do these things on their own, basically. Where, regularly they just kind of go with the flow, and that's not the point. The point is to ultimately be able to teach them and like have them eventually, hopefully, be able to do these things independently.
Awesome. So you, in other words, kind of what you're saying is that you're making goals for these people that are measurable and documenting and having to show evidence that they're meeting them. And
yes, definitely. That's one of the biggest things, I think, too, is showing that you are actually working on something and not just taking people out. So like I said, we do write, we have short-term goals and long-term goals, and we do have to document on those after every single session, and really show how much assistance that person needed, how they were working towards progressing towards that goal.
Okay. Can you like maybe just give an example of what a state, like what a goal would look like from your perspective?
Yeah. It depends on, I guess, like what we mentioned, like what domain we're thinking of, but let me think. So like a general, like a resource goal, I guess, like would be more of something along the lines of like client will increase their awareness of resources within their community by being able to identify X amount of events or activities of interest, during our planning sessions. And then you usually kind of write like how much assistance, like with minimal assistance from therapists or with maximum assistance, or so that would be kind of like a general goal. I have a lot of goals like based around memory too. So, the client will remember to reference their wall calendar to increase like awareness of what their schedule is. Okay. And so, that's another example. We have like general community endurance goals, which is more along the lines of like, tolerate X amount of minutes or distance without requiring a break, or being able to like self-initiate taking a break when they need. And gosh, I could go on and on about goals because there's so many different ones.
Sure,
but
I just figured if
it's so
anybody was listening, if they could get just a little bit more of understanding, kind of, a little bit more in-depth understanding what.
It is so individualized per person, so it really depends on what area was impacted, I guess, with their injury, and so it can be all over the place. The social skills, a lot of times, we would use like an example of like a person will like initiate a conversation without being prompted, so without like having the rec therapist kind of guide that conversation and start the conversation, that the client would be able to do that themselves, but it's all over the place. Those are a few examples though.
Sure. Yeah. So you said you work with people who've had a spinal cord injury or brain injury. Do you work with any other populations?
I do. Yeah. I actually have a couple of jobs, which I like it that way because it keeps me really busy. So I also work at a child and adolescent psychiatric hospital out in Northville. It's a state hospital called the Hawthorne Center. And so I've been there for 8 years too. So I do that, and then I also do a little bit of temp work with an outpatient psychiatric program too. So that looks very different. And recreation therapy can look very different, I think, from population to population that you're working with. But there, we serve as more of, we do groups. So when you're like in a psychiatric setting, it's primarily groups that you're leading rather than individual sessions, where with the home and community-based thing, it's majority one-on-one individual sessions. So in a psych setting, you're doing more groups and educating, a lot of education. And in the child setting specifically, we are there to provide activities that can keep these kids active. It's not labeled a residential setting, but some of these kids are there for very extended periods of time, sometimes up to a year. And so they live there and they go to school there. And so we step in as giving them that outlet for just getting out that energy. And we do a lot of sports skills groups with these kids. We do a lot of fitness with the kids. We lead swim groups with them. So it's a lot of physical activity, physically like activity focused there, which is a little bit different, I guess, as a recreation therapy, because a lot of times in psych you would be doing like activities but with a focus. So like whether your group is like focused on self-esteem or leisure education or anger management, like relaxation. So the place that I work, the setting that I work, is a little bit non-traditional, I would say, for a rec therapist role. But yeah, it's there we focus more around the physical activity part of it.
Okay. That's cool. So yeah, it does really sound like recreational therapy kind of offers really that unique proposition within like the healthcare.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and then like with my my other role, it's actually all virtual right now, and so there I am leading dialectical and cognitive behavioral therapy groups. So it's kind of all over the place. Like I mentioned, we kind of do a little bit of everything. So I think, especially this career path, it's like you can go into it and then you can pick like which outlet you want to really focus in on. So I enjoy doing a little bit of everything because it's a good challenge for me and keeps me on my toes. But yeah, there's a lot of variety and a lot of different opportunity.
Nice. So what's the training look like to become, let's say somebody's listening today and is interested in possibly going into that field. What's the training look like? What's the requirements there?
Yeah, so you do have to have a bachelor's degree. And it depends on which specific college you go to. My college, I went to Central Michigan University. They require 2 internships, but the governing board, which is NCTRC, I believe that their requirements is only 1 internship. You'd have to look. There's several different tracks you can take. Most common one is to have the bachelor's degree, and then you have to have a clinical internship experience. And so my college specifically required 2 of them, one of them not having to be clinical and the other having to be clinical. But I do think that depending on where you go, you may only have to do 1. And then you do have to take a certification exam and sit for that. But then after that, assuming you passed, you only have to get continuing education units to maintain your credentials. And so that's, going to conferences. There's some other ways to get them too. I usually just go to a couple conferences a year and, that's enough. I think you can read like research articles or there's different ways too, but I think the most common is just to go to these conferences and get your credit.
So I saw you have a couple other credentials. Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Yeah, so let's see. I have my certified brain injury specialist, so CBIS. And that one I did get. I don't remember when I got that one, but I got that one once I started the brain injury, just so that way I could really learn a lot more about brain injury and like what areas of the brain are affected and what that causes. And so that one's more specific to brain injury and different ways to best work with that population. And then my other credential is a certified disability sport specialist. And so this one so every now and then, depending on the client's interest, I will have a client that is interested in adaptive sport. And so that would be, whether it be like wheelchair, the sport, but being like the wheelchair version of it. So wheelchair basketball, wheelchair tennis. There's pretty much an adaptive way to do every single sport now.
Yeah.
So I get that one a little bit for the clients. I have more of an interest in like education on that, but I also do a lot of volunteer work with adaptive sports outside of work. And so I'm involved with an organization called Michigan Adaptive Sports, and we do adaptive downhill skiing and adaptive snowboarding. And so I
Oh,
help lead the adaptive snowboarding portion of that. And then in the summer, we do adaptive water skiing and adaptive kayaking. And so I do that. And then, and then also I help out a lot with wheelchair tennis and adaptive hiking. So that's kind of where that passion came from. That I've been very active my whole life, and I've been in sports ever
mhm.
since I was little. So I think that piece really drew me to the adaptive side of it, and
Sure.
letting, like, being able to give these people opportunities despite their circumstances. So there's definitely a way to get involved in anything that you're interested in. It's
Wow,
pretty
that's
cool,
cool.
actually. Yeah, a lot. They've come out with some really neat equipment now. I just,
So
yeah,
switching gears a little bit, so what would the process look like if you're going to pick someone up? Like, what's the assessment? I mean, you talked a
yeah,
little bit about your interventions and your goals, but if you kind of
yeah,
just give a brief description of the process.
yeah. And so with the home and community, we do have pretty good relationships with the doctors and the case managers. So
Hmm.
typically, a patient or client is assigned like a case manager that oversees their case, right? And so
Hmm.
we have these relationships with these people, and really educate them about our services and how beneficial they are. And a lot of times, post hospital, once they're getting back to life, these case managers will reach out to our company and say, "Hey, like, I have someone that's really interested." And so what we'll do is we go and meet them, and we do a very thorough evaluation that just discusses like their history, all of their deficits, their medical history. And a big part of that we focus on is like, what was your life like before? So we really try to get an idea of what this person was like, what they were doing before their accident. That way we can translate that to our goals and how we provide our therapy after. So we meet with them, do this evaluation, which is probably, I don't know, an hour, 1 to 2 hours or so.
Hmm.
And then from there we establish the goals, and then start planning. And so a lot of times, depending on how high functioning the person is, I always try to give my clients the most independence that they can have with that piece, because it's their lives, it's their leisure. And so I really try to get my clients involved in the planning process and not relying on others just to create an activity schedule for them.
Okay.
So a lot of times after that eval process, and then throughout therapy once a month, I usually try to sit down with the person, and we kind of come up with a big calendar, and this is where we do all of our leisure planning and education and research. And then so then we go from there and plan out the sessions.
Nice. And
Hmm.
does insurance, how does insurance cover the, I'm guessing?
Yeah, yeah, that's been a really big thing going on right now.
Sure.
So right now, unfortunately, rec therapy is not recognized, and is not as well known as the PT and OT and all of that, and speech. And
Hmm.
so we're covered under regular health insurance. With this individual community-based therapy is not. In a hospital setting, it would be grouped into like what you're paying per day. So a lot of times, if you're like in an inpatient setting,
Hmm.
you will see a rec therapist in addition to like the OTs and the PTs. That's just grouped into your per diem like day rate that is charged. But with us, after in the home and community setting, it's auto insurance. Right now is primarily the only insurance that will cover recreation therapy. Unfortunately, so it is a bummer, because a lot of times we do have to turn down people that that would definitely benefit and really want our services, just because
Hmm.
they don't have those codes to be like that. They haven't recognized us as like a necessary, I guess, treatment option yet. And so as of right now, it's strictly auto or pay out of pocket.
Okay.
at least for like the home and community part of it, where like with, in a psychiatric setting and all of that, usually you're billed like a day rate. And so when you're in that type of setting, it's kind of just like included with everything that you're getting kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so it does put a damper on some things because there's so many more people that I think that we could serve if it was more recognized,
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Do you partner with any other programs in the state, country?
I think that we do have a couple of contracts with like different rehab programs and all, and specifically like geared around brain injury. So if they have a client that they get, a lot of times we'll refer them to our recreation therapy services. But I think a lot of it is just the individual therapists having good relationships with different organizations. So like a lot of times, if people are interested in certain adaptive sports, they'll come to me and ask me like, hey, who can I connect with to get this person involved in, adaptive hunting or whatever it might be. And so we work with each other, I think, a lot and really rely on each other to have like that big book of resources if we're looking for something specific for a client. But yeah, not any like specific companies that I could name off the top of my head.
Okay, but you did mention like some adaptive sports organizations, so it might be more like charitable or nonprofits that you.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, we don't have any specific partnerships with anyone in particular, but I know that if I have a client that's interested in whatever it might be, then I'm going to go to that particular organization and ask them, what can we do or how can we get this person involved? And then a lot of times us as individual therapists will take our clients to these events and these clinics that these organizations host and provide the support.
Okay. And so something I've been wondering, especially because you talk a lot about the group settings, how has COVID changed how the way you have to do things?
Yeah, I think with us being 99% community based, it's just been the hardest thing, is because all of a sudden the community was shut down, right? There was like, you couldn't go anywhere, nothing was open. And even now, it being almost 2 years of this, it's still impacted us a lot. So in the beginning, there was a time where we had to stop seeing people at all because we didn't want to have any contact at the very beginning. But we did have telehealth and virtual sessions up and running. So that took a lot of creativity to figure out how can I make this session therapeutic with minimal resources over a virtual screen. So I was seeing quite a few clients virtually. And I was doing more like relaxation coping skill type sessions to help people cope with like the isolation and just all the effects that came from everything being shut down and not being able to have that social contact with people. And so we were doing a lot of Zoom and virtual. And then even so, like once the community started opening up, there was still a lot that was restricted. And so we've had to really use our minds and try to come up with different like free and different activities and really try to figure it out as we go kind of thing. So it's definitely been a challenge because I know beforehand we were doing a lot of groups. So we were doing like a men's group every month and a women's group and bowling group, and we were getting people together all the time. And a lot of times that was the highlight of that person's month, and being able to see their buddies and go to these things. And so that's been the hardest challenge is losing that and, still respecting people's comfort levels. So some people are ready to go back and then there's others that just aren't. And so we did do a couple virtual group events, and we did a lot of like educational videos and posted those to our Facebook and stuff like that, just to try to keep people engaged.
So now that you are, I take it you are seeing some people in person again, right?
Yeah, I'm 100% back to in person now.
And I'm just curious, how have you noticed how far it set people back on their goals? Like that period of time?
Yeah, it definitely. I mean, it's been a while. I've been back in person for a while now, but at the beginning, I think it definitely did because you already have these people that are struggling with these depression and anxiety and isolation and all of that. And so then, the one day of the week they get to see us was
Mm-hmm.
like, that was it. And then you take that away completely. And then that just, downward, you're going to this downward spiral. And so it was a little bit tricky, I think, at the beginning just to kind of get people back to being motivated too, because people were just so used to like not having anything, and like myself included, to be honest. I was like at home every day, and I mean, I didn't mind quarantine that much, but I was, having to get back to being motivated and just like trying to get back to it was a struggle. So I think that's where a lot of our clients rely on us is to like be that person to be like, okay, we're getting out, we're gonna go do this, like no excuses kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
that was probably the biggest piece of it, is trying to like remotivate everybody.
Okay. All right, so we have a few pictures that we're going to share. Kelly will kind of elaborate what's going on and some of the things she's done over time. So, can you
Yeah.
explain a little bit?
That is called an action track chair. So those are they're beasts in the woods. They go over anything. I mean, these things can go over logs and stumps and up this crazy terrain. So you have an individual that had an interest in the outdoors and being able to hike before their accident. And so this guy, is obviously an amputee, and so he would not be able to be able to get over that terrain that you'll find in the backwoods. And so this machine here can get him through it, so he can be able to enjoy hiking again. So, this guy we took out, and I've been doing this probably like every other week with him now, especially in the fall, and he loves it. And we'll check out different trails and just be able to look at the plants and look at the nature and everything outside. So you have that adaptive goal of him being able to like engage in the leisure interest again. But then also like that, a lot of my clients that enjoy the outdoors say they enjoy it because it gives them that like feeling of relaxation and calm, and they like all of their worries go away for a second. So that,
Sure.
I think that is a huge piece of being able to use one of these machines and get outside. And so that guy, they actually offer these chairs free of use at a couple of the different state parks actually in Michigan. It's really neat. They've gotten a lot of grants for them. And so you can go on the state website, and you can actually see where they have these
Oh, wow.
available for use. Yeah. And so they have them, I mean, all over now. I think there's one up in, like a few up in the UP and the Quamanon Falls, and really cool places. So
Wow.
this one specifically is over at Island Lake State Park, which is off of near Milford, South Lyon area. And so, yeah, that is what we are doing there, is an adaptive hike.
Nice. All right, and looks like you're at a baseball game
Yeah,
there.
this was the Tigers game. Actually, not that long ago. It was one of our first group activities since COVID. Um, and so this was more of a social group. We had multiple therapists there that each had their own clients with them. And this is an example of like one of those big group activities, or one of like a larger, what we call like special event activity that we do in the community. Um, Sporting games, concerts, things like that. We don't do those frequently, but every now and then we will get together and do a big event like this. And so I guess when we're talking like goals and all of that, this is a big piece of like the memory goal and navigating in the community. So like how, when you're given your ticket and you're given a designated seat, like how do I find that seat, right? And attention, keeping track of the game, making keeping your attention on the game. There's so many different goals, I think,
Mm-hmm.
that can be addressed in just one event that seems to like to anybody else just like a fun event,
Sure.
right? So, but there's so much more to it. Is like the navigating and money management and all of that, and then the social piece of it too.
Nice.
This is an adaptive bike. And so this guy specifically, he has a spinal cord injury. And he has a little bit of movement in his lower body, not enough to be able to independently ride a bike on his own. And so this bike here is pretty neat because you have me obviously on the left there, and I can help propel the bike and steer the bike. And so they have many different options. Actually, it's a really cool program they have downtown Detroit called, I think it's called Mogo. I don't want to get the name wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's called Mogo. And they have all sorts of different bikes. Some of them are hand cycles where you're pedaling with your hands. So if you don't have any use of your lower extremities, you can use your hands to steer and pedal. And then others that are like side by side like this. So like if this person couldn't specifically have enough strength or power to steer themselves, or maybe it's somebody that, like we mentioned earlier, has like issues with impulse control and might randomly like veer off into traffic or run over a pedestrian or something like that, then this would be a good option too, because you have that support person in the seat next to you being able to help, maneuver that bike.
Gotcha.
This was at a trout farm over the summer. So this was another a small group outing I did. I had myself and then two of my clients. So both of these guys have social goals and definitely have a need for peer support and being able to have, buddies and other people to talk to. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to try this. I'm going to just get these two guys together and we're just going to see how it goes. And at first, it was a little rocky where nobody was talking. And so that's where obviously I step in and I just guide the conversation. And by the end, these two guys were hitting it off and talking fishing and helping each other out and all of that. So they both have a passion and had a passion for fishing before their accidents. And so we are at a trout farm in Baxter, and it's actually really cool. We've done several groups here too, but it's a really cool place to be able to take people and guarantee that you're going to catch a fish. You basically just stick your pole in there and you come out with a fish.
Oh,
but
wow.
it's nice because it's the fun of it. I mean,
Sure.
fishing, if you've ever fished, it requires a lot of patience. And so, with this specific place, it's nice because you can get that like instant gratification and reward of being able to like actually take something home with you. And so they cut it all up there and fillet it and you take it home. And then I actually followed this session up with this guy here. This is trout. And so they package it all up for you. So this session was like more leisure focused and socially focused. And then the following week, we ended up researching recipes, and we went to the store, we got all of the ingredients, and then we cooked up the fresh trout that he caught. So it was kind of cool because it was like a carryover from week to week.
Yeah, no kidding. That's cool.
Yeah.
How about here?
Oh, another fishing one. Yeah, this was several years ago when I first started. This was a fishing group, and so this was we had multiple clients there at the time, and so it was the social aspect of it. But then we also had several, what do you call them? Like pro fisher people. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know what they're called, but like guys that fish all the time in tournaments and stuff like that. And so we had a couple guys that volunteered to come out and bring their fancy nice boats out. And so we were able to get clients out on the water. Some people just enjoyed fishing from the dock. And so that photo there was a big fishing, kind of like an intro to fishing social event. So it's a group of guys, and I think there's probably some women there too, but a lot of times these guys, they're feeling like they're guys and hang with the buddies and being able to do something normal. And so that was a fun fishing group we did.
Cool.
Yeah. This is one of my adaptive snowboarding lessons. So this guy, he is one of my clients that I've had for several years. And when I think he's actually in another photo too later on, but when I first started with him, he was unable to talk, unable to walk. He was using a wheelchair. Just cognitively very low level. And this was several years after, but he worked his way up to being able to snowboard. So here, for adaptive snowboarding, like I said, I work a lot with Michigan Adaptive Sports too. We don't have a ton of adaptive equipment necessarily. I think it's more of like the techniques you're using to teach people. And we do use like a gait belt style around the waist to be able to hold on. And so with him specifically, he is one that can tend to have some issues with impulse control and safety in the community. And so with him, we were really focused on just learning the concepts of stopping, which is very, very important. But then also just like being aware of other people around you, making sure you're not, going down into a place where you're going to crash right into somebody. So with him, it was just using really simple techniques of like redirecting his attention to the places that he needed to on us, so that way he would avoid, potential safety issues. So he comes back every year, and it's so funny because he will ask me in like June when we're going snowboarding. I said, look, we gotta have snow first. So he is like an all sports guy. He loves anything that's like high risk, and he was very much like that prior to his accident too. So it's really cool because he's able to get back out and I don't think he was much of a snowboarder before. He was more of a skateboarder or longboarder type, and so he can't really do that anymore. So this gives him a different type of outlet where he can really express those, like, the athletic side of him and the risk taker side of him. So yeah, this is also with Michigan Adaptive Sports. So I was saying in the winter we do the snowboarding, and in the summer we do adaptive water skiing and kayaking. So this is one of my volunteer gigs, and so this little guy is sitting in our adaptive ski, and so you can see it's like a bucket seat. So majority of our participants will ski like this, so in a sitting position. If they have issues with balance, or water skiing's not easy as it is, and so a lot of times this is kind of like the very basic intro to water skiing. And so they sit in this little bucket seat. They have the water ski there, and then the two yellow things are called outriggers. And so that just takes away the risk of them tipping over. So that way they're able to just like sit back, relax, and have a good positive experience with it. And then eventually we do have people that come back every single summer. And eventually you do take off the yellow skis on the side, the outriggers, and it's just that basic like the water ski. And so that requires a lot more core stabilization and balance and control. And so, eventually we've had people that kind of start here, and then they kind of graduate to being able to independently control that. And usually the rope is just kind of put in the ski, so it's like hands free, just go for a ride. And then as you move up, you can pull the rope out, and you have control of being able to like guide yourself, back and forth across the wake. And this is the same guy from the snowboarding one, but this was what I was telling you guys when he could not talk or walk. So this was many years before that. He was a huge hockey player beforehand, and like I mentioned, he couldn't even stand or walk, let alone go on ice skates. I can't even ice skate, really. It takes a lot of balance and skill. And so this is an adaptive sled hockey, they call it. And so you're seated, and you have like the ski part on the bottom. And then for his, because I don't think he had very good use of his left side. So he has like the one pole on his right, but you can see the handle in the background that is attached to his. And so his dad's in the background, and he was just pushing him. But for him, just being like in that ice arena environment was huge. He hadn't been there in years since his accident. So it wasn't his version of skating, but now he actually is able to skate with, I think his physical therapist helps him with that, but with like assistance from somebody kind of supporting him with just like a gait belt around his waist. But this is where he started right after his accident. We
Yeah.
got on the ice and you use the little sticks. They cut them down short and they have little grippers on the end that pick into the ice. And then you flip them over and it's like the end of a hockey stick. And so then you use that to, bat the putt around back and forth. So that was, one of his first things that he did afterwards. He was smiling the whole time. It was so cute. This is just a kayaking trip that we did recently. So, this particular person is very resistant to really anything. He really didn't have any ideas of anything he enjoyed. And so it was kind of up to me to give him these suggestions of like, hey, let's try this. And every time, it'd be good. Like the sessions were okay and all of that, but he never would like really found anything that he really enjoyed until kayaking was like the first time I was like, we're going to throw you on the boat and we're going to put you in the water. I mean, he's never kayaked in his life, so I'm sure it was like a little intimidating, but on the way home, he was like, I had a great time, which is like, seems so simple, but like for him, this guy, he's never said that about anything else, and I've tried a lot of different things with him, was huge. So he has, he deals with a lot of pain, and so anything that requires a lot of walking, is really hard on him, which, so this is seated, it's only upper body, and so that was my thought process, is like, well, he's not going to be walking, it won't bother his lower back as much, and it didn't. So he didn't have any pain, which I'm sure was a big reason why he enjoyed it so much. But he was thrilled to do that, and we've gone a couple times since. So I think it'll be something that he'll stick with.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Last picture here.
Oh, that was just a picture of me. I didn't know if you needed one, but one of my I guess one of my big passions in life is traveling, and so that's me in New Mexico hiking. So like I mentioned earlier, I was big into sports and just anything that's active. So for me, like my personal interests are camping and hiking and traveling. And so I think that as a rec therapist, especially, it's so important for you to still be able to engage in the things that you enjoy, so that way you can bring that passion to other people, right? So everyone's like, oh, you're going to the Tigers game and you're doing this and you're doing that, your job's so fun, but it's not, at the same time, it's not for me at all. And so I think that really making sure you give yourself that like self-care time to be able to do your own leisure is really helps better you as a therapist, and you're able to give that back to your patients and your clients.
Sure. We've talked a lot today. I think we cleared up some misconceptions about the profession and what it is and what it isn't. So really appreciate you joining me today and having a chat.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything, you can feel free to give out my information. I'm happy to discuss and like anything I can do to like advocate for rec therapy, because we are so under-recognized, and it's I think it's such an important piece of life that people don't realize at all. It's like, imagine whatever you enjoy, imagine getting that completely taken away. So like that's why I think rec therapy is so valuable, is that you really get to help these people get back to like their true selves, and it's awesome to see.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll try to post some links to some of the resources you've talked about as well.
Okay, yeah, definitely.
Cool. All right, well, thanks, Kelly. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yep.